The Federal Department of Transportation is tightening up regulations for crude oil transport after serious accidents around the country have occurred. Railroads are being encouraged to use more protective cars and alert the agency about transport plans. But Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney thinks more needs to be done to protect residents who live near the tracks. He's got quite a few. And he is joining me from Washington, D.C. now to talk more about the issue. Congressman, welcome back to Capitol Tonight.
Nice to be with you.
So let's start out with this. An encouragement is not a directive. Is that correct?
That's fair to say.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't understand why the Department of Transportation isn't being more aggressive on this issue when it's clear that this is definitely something that A, people are concerned about, and B, it's dangerous.
Yes, that's right. I'm not clear either, but we're working on this very hard. And let me tell folks what we're talking about. So we now have, and it's happened rather quickly, we now have 1 billion gallons of crude oil moving through the Hudson Valley every year.
Yep.
There are 78,000 rail cars out there called DOT 111 rail cars that carry this crude that we know are not safe. And we've known since 1992 they're not safe. And they've been involved in a number of very serious accidents. So we are not safe until the cars are safe. These trains are not safe until the cars are safe. We need to stop using these DOT 111 cars, but we need to do much more. And that's why I've introduced 2 pieces of legislation to protect us both on the commuter rail lines, but also increasingly on the freight rail lines because of these crude shipments. And I'd be happy to tell you what the legislation does.
Go ahead.
Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to do positive train control. Positive train control is simple Wi-Fi and GPS technology that means that if the human being driving the train has a problem, we can still stop the train. And we can do that without having to rely on every person being perfect every time.
Right.
And my legislation would open up existing federal financing to allow Metro North to speed up the implementation of positive train control. And I would also renew a federal grant program that will help pay for it. Now, I want to give Metro North and the governor credit for what they've done recently on this. They really are moving aggressively, and that's good. But I introduced another piece of legislation this week that would also do other things because we need multiple redundant safety systems. So what does that mean? It means we need an alerter switch in every control car on every train. In the past, Metro North has had these switches on one end of the train, but not the other, which when you go north is great, but when you're coming south, it's not. An alerter switch tells you when the engineer's not paying attention and sounds an alarm. And there's other things like that to protect the workers as well.
Hold
Shunting
on.
devices to make sure the trains stay on the right direction.
Hold on, Congressman. I'm terribly sorry to interrupt you, but it feels like train safety writ large is what we're talking about here, but there are 2 separate issues going on. When you start talking about Metro North, of course, we had that terrible fatal derailment, which got people talking about positive train control and other things, that why these things have not already been put in place when they've been discussed as necessary. And then separately, we also have the crude oil transport, which is not happening on commuter rail tracks.
That's correct, but
Okay.
It's the same safety issues that we need to implement because in both cases, the reason trains go off the track is often that you have a fatigued human being. That's why we need to have mandatory fatigue plans for commuter and for freight rails, is because they're going too fast. In the Metro North crash, the train was moving 80 miles an hour through a turn at Spuyten Duyvil that's a 30-mile-an-hour curve.
Right.
That's why we need positive train control to stop that train even when the engineer doesn't. That is especially true on freight trains carrying oil shipments as well. So the technologies and the safety measures and the good railroading practices and the fatigue plans that my legislation would require will both make the freight rail safe and the commuter rail safe. That's why we got to do both.
So who is most at fault here in terms of failing to move fast? It seems to me like this is a federal government issue, a Department of Transportation issue at the federal level. I'm not so sure how much the state is capable of doing, although you did mention that the Cuomo administration is trying to get something done. But really, this has to happen with the Obama administration, doesn't it?
Listen, we all got to work together, and we can spend all day long pointing fingers, but I'd rather light a candle than curse the darkness. I think the governor and Metro North are doing a great job right now to get on top of this. It's our responsibility on the federal level to be a good partner. That's why my legislation opens up existing federal financing to give systems like Metro North the capacity and the resources to get these upgrades in place. It's why my legislation would renew the grant program to allow them to pay for these systems. And we can get this done. We need to have a real deadline. We need to drive towards it. So we need safer commuter and freight trains, and we need them right away. And we can do it with existing federal financing authority and with the state dedicating the resources they've already said they'll dedicate, and I give the governor credit for that. We can get it done.
Do you believe that there's actually a request at the Albany port? I mean, that's how the attention to much of this came to light, I believe, for a lot of people. I don't know that a lot of people were paying attention until it became clear that there was a desired expansion on the part of the crude oil transporters at the Port of Albany. Do you believe that the DEC should allow that, and are they moving carefully enough when they're considering that request?
Well, I'm not going to second guess what's going on in Albany. It's outside of my district, and I'll let the folks who represent that area speak to that. But what I will say this, we need to do everything. We need to have more safety drills. We need to have more community involvement. We need to know when these shipments are coming through our communities. We need to have our first responders properly trained to respond to these types of accidents, which we must also do everything to prevent. And that's what my legislation is focused on.
I do want to ask you some political questions, if you don't mind, just because I haven't seen you in a while.
I'm shocked, Liz. I'm shocked.
First, I saw a report recently.
Knowing of your dislike of politics.
I
yes.
know, I can't stand it.
What would you like to know?
I did see a report recently that New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio was down in D.C. and he did meet with members of the congressional delegation, and there was some carping on behalf of some members, not yourself, that I saw, that the governor hasn't done the same. Is the governor not paying enough attention to the delegation and not communicating sufficiently?
Listen, let me tell you this. Well, first, on the meeting with the mayor, we had a great meeting with Mayor de Blasio. He's been a friend of mine for 16 years, 17 years. We've worked together in the past. There's lots of things we can do together, and I really give him credit for coming down. We had a great meeting with the delegation that also included Senator Schumer. With respect to Governor Cuomo, I can just tell you this. Governor Cuomo has been there for me every step of the way in my first term in Congress, whether it's rebuilding the Port of Newburgh, which I'm working very hard to do right now to create hundreds of good jobs. We've got a huge opportunity with a company called Hudson Valley Lighting in the city of Newburgh, whether it's working on the Tappan Zee Bridge together. The governor's been a full partner to me, and I've got nothing but praise for the way he's running the state. I think he's doing a great job.
You also, I mean, I've been sort of inundated by press releases and emails coming out of your political shop. You are facing, of course, a rematch from Nan Hayworth, and it seems very similar to the conversations that we had the last time when you actually defeated her, which was 2 years ago. I mean, do you still think that this whole Tea Party rhetoric and painting her as an ultra-conservative, that's still as pertinent now as it was 2 years ago? Is that still a problem in Washington?
Well, I think people still don't want, Nan Hayworth to end traditional Medicare. I don't think people still don't want Nan Hayworth to defund Planned Parenthood. They still don't like the idea, Nan Hayworth's plan, to give huge tax cuts to multimillionaires like Nan Hayworth so that we can, defund Planned Parenthood and do the rest and still say we're going to balance the budget. It's wrong. It's a bad plan. And she is a member of the Tea Party. This is her philosophy. It's not some label I put on her. It's who she is. And I think that, the voters will make that choice. But the choice remains the same. The choice is between a Bill Clinton Democrat and one with results, one who's working across the aisle. We've done 1,600 constituent cases in 14 months. We've returned $2 million to those 1,600 individuals and families. Most of them are seniors and veterans. We're working with 48 different communities on 123 different requests for $300 million of disaster relief. She thought we ought to talk about balancing the budget before helping people after Hurricane Irene. We've done real things. We're getting funding for the Hopewell Junction Superfund site to get cleaned up. She didn't do a thing about that. And so what we're going to say is it's the same choice, a Bill Clinton Democrat versus a Tea Party Republican, but we both have a record now, and I'm very proud of mine.
Well, we'll talk more about your record as the campaign heats up, I'm sure. Until then, I thank you very much for being with me this evening.
It's always fun, Liz. Thank you.